stop what you're doing, because if you are new to sublimation, I want you to watch this video all the way through, because I'm going to be bringing you the mistakes that we made that I want you to avoid. My name is Lauren, and I'm a craft producer here at Makers Gonna Learn, where we bring you inspiration, education, and motivation on all things crafty. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it and really do a deep dive into all of the mistakes that we made that we want you to avoid. Number one on the list of things that I want you to avoid is thinking that you cannot do sublimation. I know this sounds silly. However, this is what holds a lot of people back from even starting. So, although it's not a true mistake, I wanted to start out with this one because you can do it. Sublimation is not that hard. It may seem like a daunting task at first, but trust me, it is something that you can do, and not only do, but you can definitely master. Number two is I don't want you to think that it's just as easy as pulling a printer out, setting it up, and starting. Now, like I said, it's not that hard. However, there are processes that you have to go through. So I don't want you to just automatically get your printer out, start filling it with ink, and think that you're good to go. Because, like I said, there are processes that you have to go through if you are converting a printer, or if you're even setting up a sublimation ready printer. It's not just as easy as setting up and printing. You do have to download print drivers, you have to get your color profiles right, and so many other things. Which leads me to the next mistake that I do not want you to make. And that is getting in the black hole of YouTube and doing so much research that you feel like your brain is going to explode. Now, there are so many people out there that are amazing at teaching sublimation and how it works. However, we all have different styles and ways that we teach. So if you take a little bit here and a little bit there and you try to put it all together, a lot of times what you end up getting is just a modge podge of a lot of different things and no real one true method. So I don't want you to fall into the mistake of getting down this rabbit hole of YouTube videos trying to research it yourself. I want you to find one person and stick to that. And really and truly, I hope you choose us, because we do have a program called Makers Gonna Sublimate, where we walk you hand in hand from start to finish with your sublimation journey. Even if you don't have anything purchased, we walk you through different printers so that you can really make a truly educated decision on which printer is going to be best for you in your life, through setting it up, finding your color profiles, marrying an ink, all the way through your first press. So, mistake number three, don't fall down the black hole of YouTube with research. Find one person, stick with them, and I really think Makers Gonna Sublimate is the way that you should go. Now, the next mistake that I want you guys to avoid, and it's a pretty big one, is not tacking your print down to your blank. Now, if you're using a heat press like this, it may seem silly to think that you have to tack something down because it's flat, it's not going to be moving. However, it's very important that you always tape or tack your material down, whether that be with heat resistant tape or as sublimation adhesive spray. Either way, you have to have something to adhere your print down to your blank, or there's always going to be a chance of it moving no matter what type of stable surface you are using. Next mistake that I definitely want you all to avoid is talking about taping your stuff down, especially on full wrap tumblers. And that mistake is not pressing your seams down. Once you start, you have your full wrap design on your tumbler and you tape it down. One thing you must always do is take something. A lot of times our fingernail will work the best. If not, you can use a burnishing tool and run that along the seam of that tape to make sure that you get a good seal, especially if you are sublimating in a convection oven. Now, the reason that we need a good seal on our wraps is because if there is space left between your print and your blank, and it's not completely sandwiched up against your blank, what happens in the process of sublimation is when it heats up, that ink from your design turns into a gas, and there's going to be room for it to move around between the print and your design. So having it right up next to each other and pressing that seam down when you are taping, make sure that there is no room and it goes directly from the print to the blank and gives you no ghosting. Now, let's talk about our heat source and the things that we use when it comes to pressing. The next mistake that I want you guys to avoid is not allowing your heat source, whether it be a heat press, an easy press, a convection oven, whatever you plan on using, not allowing it to fully heat up. Now, I'm gonna call out Tanner on this one because he is so bad at this. He's really a lot of times in a hurry to get things done, and we may be the same. I want you to take a step back. Do not be in a hurry when it comes to sublimation, and make sure that your heat press gets to the correct temperature. Because what can happen is if it is at a lower temp and you've not allowed it to heat all the way up, when you go to press it, it's not going to give you the most vibrant results that you should see once it is at the correct temperature. So don't make that mistake. Always make sure that your heat source gets to the correct temperature before you press. Now, along with our heat source, when we are laying our materials down, one mistake that I want you guys to definitely avoid is using a Teflon sheet instead of butcher's paper. Now, a Teflon sheet will come in handy to protect your heat plate from getting any of the sublimation ink on it. However, you must always use butcher's paper at least under your Teflon sheet because couple different reasons. First reason is butcher's paper absorbs the moisture that can be found in your blank, especially textiles. So the butcher's paper is going to help absorb that moisture, plus it is something that you can throw away. You don't want to be throwing Teflon sheets away all the time because there are more times than not when you are sublimating, the ink is going to come through the paper and be transferred on to the layer that is between your print and your heat source. So what the butcher's paper does is it catches that ink so that it doesn't get on your heat source and then transferred over to your next design. So if you wanted to do like what I call a sublimation sandwich and do butcher's paper, blank, sublimation print, another layer of butcher's paper, if you want to add another layer of protection for your heat source and add a Teflon sheet, you can. However, it's not necessary, but I don't want you guys to be using Teflon over butcher's paper because truly, when it comes down to it, butcher's paper is going to overrule Teflon for me every single time. While we're talking about butcher's paper, one mistake you definitely don't want to do is reuse it, especially if there is ink on the butcher's paper. So, listen y'all, I reuse butcher's paper quite frequently. However, you must make sure that there is no excess ink from another press on it. And with that being said, I probably wouldn't use it over 2 or 3 times because it is going to brown and turn over time, so you don't want to reuse it a lot. You can reuse it if it's clean 2 to 3 times at most, but we're not gonna reuse butcher's paper 4 or 5 plus times. Now, still on the pressing portion of this, one mistake that you're not going to do is if you are pressing something, let's say you've pressed it. First mistake you want to avoid when it comes to pressing is having too little pressure. So, if you have a heat source that has an adjustable pressure setting, you need to make sure that you have a really good pressure point with that blank. You want it to be a little tough to close, but not so tough that you can't close it, but you don't want it to be super easy to close. And let me give you an example of what would be way too easy. So this, way too easy to close. You can see the space between our bottom plate and our top plate. This is something you must avoid. Pressure is very important when it comes to sublimation. It is very important with the process, so make sure that you have ample pressure, whether you use an easy press or a heat press on your blank. Now, if you're using an easy press, I highly suggest trying to put a little bit of extra pressure. The problem with that is with an easy press, if you put extra pressure, you might move it a little bit. However, if your material is taped down properly, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but I do suggest you add a little more pressure than just the weight of the press if you are using an easy press. Another thing that you must avoid with sublimation is checking to see if it has started the process. Y'all, you must always trust the process. Once you start pressing, do not stop until the time is ready, because if you bring that heat source off of that and you try to check it and you start pressing it again, you're going to get ghosting where you lifted it up. So once again, trust the process. Do not check your press once you have started pressing, and just let it be. Now, the next mistake is going to piggyback off that one, guys. Do not ever try to repress, because you're not going to get it lined up. Just start a new project, because if you've messed up one, a repress is just going to make it worse. So never ever try to repress something. Another mistake that I definitely want you guys to avoid is using the wrong heat source. Now, this may sound silly, but trust me, it's not. Your heat source is very important. For example, if you want to press a design that is, let's say, 12 by 12, but your heat source is a 9 by 9 easy press, that is going to be the wrong heat source for that project. The reason being is because with sublimation, you have to have an even heat source across the whole design at one time. Now, there may be instances if you are, let's say, doing a blanket that has lots of different pictures on it that fit within that 9 by 9 easy press, you can press that at different times for each picture. That is fine. But if you have a 12 by 12 design, but you only have a 9 by 9 easy press, that's not going to work, because what's going to happen is you may press one area for the correct amount of time and it sublimates great, but then you have other areas that you have to press, and that heat source is going to overlap and it's not going to be right. So make sure your design fits within the heat plate that you are using, whether it is an easy press or a clamshell heat press, auto press, whatever. Make sure you're always using the right heat source. Same thing with tumblers, cups. If you're wanting to sublimate those types of materials, you clearly can't sublimate a cup or a tumbler with a heat press. You have to have a different type of heat source, whether it be a convection oven or a tumbler press. You must always use the correct heat source. Now let's talk about printing. When it comes to printing, there are quite a few mistakes that you need to avoid. Number one is not mirroring your design. You must always mirror your sublimation prints, because what happens when you turn it upside down to press, if you do not mirror it, it's going to be mirrored when you press. However, when you mirror, when you print, and you flip it upside down to press, it is going to be the correct way. Now, it's probably going to happen. You're going to forget to mirror. Don't let it stress you out, but try your best to avoid this mistake, and always, always mirror your design. Another mistake that you must avoid that I spent so much time figuring out for you guys, and we have it all within the sublimation course, is choosing the wrong color profile for your printer and ink. Now, all printers and all inks are made different. So what we have done is we have gone through the process with different printers and different inks and found the best color profiles for you guys to use depending on what printer you have and what ink you have. And this is why I highly suggest that if you have not started sublimation but you do want to get started, you start with Maker's Gonna Sublimate, because then you can make the best educated decision on which printer to use plus which ink to purchase for that printer. Because then you're gonna have those perfect color profiles already set up for you. When I tell you we spent hundreds of dollars in blanks, I am not kidding. I know for a fact that we sublimated no less than probably 24 mugs, try and get color profiles perfect, plus license plates and other things, and hours of figuring out how to download the drivers, getting it on our computer, and finding that perfect color profile for your printer and ink combination. So using those wrong color profiles are not going to give you the best results. So you must always try your best to use the color profiles set up for your printer and ink, and make sure you use those to get absolute flawless results every single time. Now, this next mistake that you need to avoid may sound silly, but trust me, it is one that is going to change the game for you, and that is you need to avoid cutting out your design, and you need to try to tear the edges, especially if you are working with materials like textiles and neoprenes and things like that. Now, the reason we want to tear the edges on our sublimation designs is because if we don't, and we have a harsh line and we go to press, especially with textiles and neoprenes, like I said before, what's gonna happen is when you press, you're gonna get those harsh lines. So if we tear the edges, it gives it more of a soft, kind of like a feathered, the paper is kind of feathered. So we do not get those harsh lines when we press. So avoid the mistake of cutting your design out and just tear it. That's all you have to do to get those soft edges. The next mistake that I want you guys to avoid is not cleaning your blank. Whether it be textiles, a hard surface, a tumbler, whatever, you need to always clean your blank. The reason being is because a lot of times there are foreign fibers on these blanks, and when they are exposed to heat and pressure, they will change colors. We see this a lot, especially on shirts and textiles, with like blue dots everywhere that we don't know where they came from, and that's because we didn't lint roll and get those foreign fibers off of that blank before we pressed. So definitely avoid that mistake and always lint roll or clean your blank. Finally, the last mistake that I want you guys to avoid is not using your sublimation printer. Now, this is very important, especially with conversion printers. You need to use your printer at least once a week. Maybe you're not doing a lot of sublimation at the time. However, you need to make sure that you're always using your printer, because what can happen is the print heads can get clogged, and we don't want that to happen. That is very easily done, especially with the Epson EcoTank printers. We want to use it once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, just to make sure that those print heads don't get clogged, because once they get clogged, they're very hard to clear out. So don't make that mistake of letting your printer just sit. Even if you're not sublimating a lot, try to print, and then you can save that print to press at a later date. They do keep pretty well. So just make sure you're not letting your printer sit, and make sure that you are printing once every week, if not once every 2 weeks. Now, I know that was a lot of information, guys, and I hope that it has helped you to avoid those mistakes, because like I said earlier, we want to make the mistakes so that you guys don't have to. We want to troubleshoot and make sure that we make your sublimation journey as seamless and easy as possible. And the best way to do that is to hop on with Maker's Gonna Sublimate. If you click that first link down below, it will take you right to our join page where you can see all of the lessons that we have. Plus, you get over 500 sublimation ready files if you join today. Y'all, that's insane. You get a full course and 500 files ready for you to start sublimating. Just make sure you click that link down below. Check that out, because I'm sure you're gonna love it. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell notification so that you can be notified every time we get crafty. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. We will see you guys in the next one.